In this video, we're going to be taking a look at creating the first object in activity 125, which is called Sketches, Extrusions, and Revolutions. Oh my. So the first step we're going to take when we get started here is we're going to go ahead and create a new component. This part doesn't really have a name, but it's got a little square like kind of connector end on it, so that's why I'm just going to call this connector. And I'll say OK. Now, when I before I get started, this part is in millimeters, so I'm going to go ahead and change my document settings by clicking on the arrow and then choosing the change units button. Changing over to millimeters. Typically I stay in inches on all my measurements, so I'm going to go ahead and just change from here and not set to the default. Then I'm going to go ahead and, with this active component, I'm going to go ahead and say create sketch. I'll choose the front plane here to work off of. We're going to sketch a 2-point rectangle. I'm going to start by clicking on the origin first and then go ahead and setting in the dimensions. So I'll go ahead and click to set the rectangle, and then I can go ahead and switch to the sketch dimension option, and when I did this I pressed the D key on my keyboard. So the height of this is going to be 30 millimeters, and then the width of this rectangle is going to be 20. So what we're going to do is we're going to finish the sketch. Once we have this base sketch kind of created, I'm going to choose the Revolve option. And what it's going to ask for is it's going to ask for a profile. So it's already picked up one selected, so that means it's already picked up the one shape, which is the rectangle. Now your menu has selected over for you to choose an axis. So now either one of two things. Either if I zoom out a little bit, I can either choose like this blue axis that sticks up there, which is the y-axis, or I could even click on the side of the rectangle that I want to revolve around. But when I do that, here's what's going to happen. I'll zoom back in here. Is now it goes through and does a full 360 revolve. If I grab the little grip, this is what it does. It takes that rectangular shape and it goes through and just revolves the entire shape all the way around until it meets 360 degrees. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to say OK. And then now what we can do is we can go to put that little square protrusion on the top. To do that, I'm going to click on Create Sketch. And I'm going to make sure to choose the top face of the cylinder. And under the Create panel, I'm going to go down to Rectangle, and I'm going to choose the Center Rectangle option. The center point I'll set right on the origin, and then I'll go ahead and draw this out. While I'm drawing this out, I'm going to go ahead and type in, this is going to be a 10 millimeter by 10 millimeter, and I'm going to press the tab key once I type in 10 into one of the boxes to move over to the other one. I'm going to go ahead and hit enter, and now I'll go ahead and set a 10 millimeter square there in the middle. So I'm going to go ahead and say finish the sketch. From here I'll say extrude. I'm going to choose just the rectangle to extrude, and the height of this is going to be 15 millimeters. Then I can go ahead and say OK. In order to do the next part, it has these kind of rounded edges that kind of meet up to form. I'm going to have to go up here to the fillet option, so in the modify panel. So, or if you click here, you can also find it here as well. But I'm going to go ahead and choose what edges that I want, so I'll click this edge, and then if I zoom in, not necessarily that you always have to zoom in, but you'll be able to see these lines a little bit easier. So I'm going to go ahead and select the lines, and then I'm going to go ahead and type in that I want these to be 5 millimeters, and that'll build up material since that's an external fillet there, and that way we can go ahead and add that in. And I can go ahead and say OK. Alright, so here's our little connector piece pretty much done. The last option we're going to choose is Chamfer, or if you have to just click on the modify menu, here's Chamfer. And then I'm going to choose, so I'm going to kind of rotate this using the view cube down to the bottom. And then instead of equal distance on the type, I want to choose to be distance and angle. And the distance and angle, I then have to select the edge. So I'm going to select the rounded edge, or the edge that I have it as a circle. The edge is going to be a 5 millimeter, and then I'm going to go through and hit the tab key, or I could also click up here in these menus, and that'll give me my options. So I'm going to do 30 degrees. Now the only thing is looking at the drawing, this is not exactly the type of thing that we want. So I want to actually have it flipped where the dimension is actually changed. So I'm going to choose the flip tool, and that's going to go ahead and now put in the angle and the distance how I would like it. So I'm going to go ahead and say OK. And now I can go ahead and I can save the part. And I would go ahead and make sure this is in your project. So here's our practice folder. I would create a new folder inside of here, which you can do right here in this menu if you don't have one already. I'm going to do 125, activity 125 in the practice. Double click inside the folder, and then I'll go through and it'll show you where the location is. And we'll just call this connector. And I'll hit save.